spoiler warning before we get into the video. Have you seen this image? If yes, then you clicked on the right video. If you haven't, then you can stay anyway, because with the anime adaptation right around the corner, I want to talk about my favorite webcomic, Solo Leveling. A Korean webcomic which you could argue is the most popular of them all. A power fantasy where we see our main character become very overpowered. Now this obviously isn't a unique concept. The world of anime and manga has an absolute ton of these kind of stories with this kind of plot. I mean, there are so many, maybe too many. With these kinds of stories, having an overpowered main character is cool and all, but then you can easily find yourself at a point where that's all there is to the plot. Obviously not all are like this, but this kind of thing is pretty common, and that's where Solo Leveling comes in. Because does the protagonist become overpowered? Yes. But is there more to it? Yes. And be warned, I will just be talking, there's no real structure to this video, but anyway, let's talk about it. So I called it a webcomic in the intro, but I guess the technical correct term for it would be manhwa, which is pretty much the Korean equivalent to manga. But that's not the only difference, because while with manga each chapter is formatted page by page and you scroll sideways, with manhwa you scroll downwards and it's more continuous rather than split into pages. So my reasoning for mentioning all of that is because it brings me to the first thing I want to talk about, which is the fact that the art is absolutely unbelievable. It will be one of the first things you notice when you begin, and it's even more impressive when you add to it that each chapter is also released on a weekly schedule, just like manga, and it is fully coloured. Now, I'm certainly not trying to discredit any of the work of manga authors and artists, because we have all heard about the draining and stressful conditions that they work under. But the art for Solo Leveling is a feast for the eyes, and thanks to the format of scrolling downwards instead of sideways, we get amazing panels that stretch across each chapter, so as you scroll past them, it adds a great deal of immersion. The art flows with the story, visualizing it in the best and most fitting way possible. It's not hyper detailed or realistic like, say, Berserk or Vagabond, but the art style specifically complements what's going on in the story so well. And as for the story, there's two things I want to talk about. So the first is that you completely get swept away by the gorgeous art and immense hype of watching our main character grow, going from zero to hero and just all around being that guy. Quick warning, I'm not trying to call anyone out with this next part. I'm kind of being melodramatic and I'm not being too serious when I say this, so just bear with me here. We kind of have a self-insert situation going on, and that's completely fine. What I mean by self-insert is that as we see our main character grow, the simplicity of getting caught up in the hype is in part because we see his humble beginnings of being a nobody to becoming the pinnacle of, everything. And the beginning section of the story where he isn't of use to any of the people around him, a lot of us can relate to that, even if it's not to that extreme, of course, and obviously without all the magical abilities, the monsters, the dungeons and so forth. Now, I don't want to make this video into some kind of psychological analysis therapy session or whatever, but I'm pretty sure you've imagined what it would be like to be a celebrity or super rich or something like that. Well, in this case, it's imagining being the savior of the world, and the main character Jinwoo's humble beginnings just help us to imagine, like, what if, it's just a simple question of what if. And then we get the answer to that question when Jinwoo gets some sweet new abilities and a leveling system unique to him where he just gets more and more powerful. Okay, I'm done with the serious stuff, because now we see him slicing and dicing with some of the coldest panels in fiction. But didn't I say earlier that if he is just overpowered, it can get really boring? Well, that brings me to the second point I want to talk about. The story is far more than just the protagonist being ridiculously OP. Now, the story isn't anything revolutionary, you wouldn't compare it with the best stories you've ever experienced, but it's not trying to be the best of the best, but it can be argued that it is one of the best in its genre of power fantasies, and that is because it goes beyond a simple power fantasy. For example, take these supporting characters in this manhwa. First off, I will say that Solo Leveling is almost solely driven by Sung Jinwoo, our protagonist, and any page time given to the side characters will be when they are either with Jinwoo himself or they are discussing about him. But then they have enough personality that when they do show up, you will point at them like, oh, that guy, and you'll be interested in what they're gonna do. Each of their designs is distinct and unique, and they don't take away from the plot at all. Rather, maybe they still do add to it, maybe I'm being a bit harsh. You might not remember their name, but you won't be disappointed when they do show up. But that's not to say there isn't any characters or character relationships that grow beyond a simple reaction. There's a couple of them. For example, his family relationships. We learn that his motive is to find any kind of help for his mother. So despite his weakness, he has a solid motive which continues well after he gains his newfound power. So, as I said, it just isn't as simple as becoming super strong and beating the other guys. And on the note of becoming super strong, we have the power progression and different tiers of power, which is very well presented. So you know how there's pirates in One Piece, ninja or shinobi in Naruto, or soul reapers, Quincy's in Bleach? In solo leveling we have hunters, ranked in tiers of strength from E up to A and then S. There's a clear and believable jump in abilities between each level, so as Jinwoo grows stronger, it feels like he's grown stronger, if you understand what I'm trying to say. His power doesn't feel superficial, and anyone we meet who is of a higher ranking also feels like they are of a certain caliber. So a threat we meet early on will seem strong, but then later on when our main characters grown stronger, they will seem weak. And thanks to the pre-established tier system of power, anyone who is stronger and is introduced later on, it doesn't seem out of the blue. And then talking about the power, I'm kind of just aimlessly jumping around at this point, so I'm sorry, but in the intro I did say I would be rambling, so let's just continue. The system by which Jinwoo's powers operate, well, not the system, but the actual abilities themselves are just there. I can't even put into words how. Okay, look up the word epic in the dictionary, and that will lead you to the word arise. And from there, you get pure greatness. Arise is like the equivalent of Luffy saying he will become the king of the pirates, and then the subsequent arising that occurs makes the smile that's already on your face even bigger, and it never gets old, which is a testament to how the story tackles the challenge presented by having an overpowered protagonist. And add to that, once the pace picks up, it just does not slow down. There's always the next thing that needs to be dealt with, but we are with Jinwoo every step of the way. As in, there's no cut corners. We see every moment, every upgrade, every decision he makes, so it's not like we cut away from him, then cut back and he suddenly increased his power tenfold. We will be there with him through all of his trials and tribulations from the very beginning. And now that I mentioned the beginning, I think I should talk about the upcoming anime. I am very much looking forward to it, and I am very much going to enjoy it. My biggest, I wouldn't say concern, but what's on my mind the most is how well the animation is going to turn out. Because being very action heavy, you don't want it to look too stiff. But the reason I wouldn't say it's a concern is because what we get in the trailers looks good, and I'm not expecting any Demon Slayer or JJK level of animation. It isn't the be-all end-all, for me at least it isn't. For example, take the Record of Ragnarok anime, which was blasted for how bad and basic the animation was. PowerPoint slides, I think, was the description for the fights. And although I agree that the animation was bad, I still enjoyed both seasons. You know, the reason I've chosen to use the Record of Ragnarok's anime as the example is because of how collectively it's kind of looked down upon. And never mind the fact that the animation looks worse when you compare it with the art from the manga, which is amazing. Also, just to clear up, the solo leveling anime is not going to look anywhere near as bad as this Record of Ragnarok anime has turned out to be. Anyway, the reason why I still enjoyed it is because even with such animation, from my point of view, the voice acting was still great, the soundtracks were still great, and just like solo leveling, the story isn't anything super special and it is extremely action heavy. So my point is that beyond the animation, there are still the soundtracks and the voice acting to hold it up. So that's what I'm hoping for. I'm not going in with my expectations through the roof, and I'm pretty sure everyone's of that same thought process. I mean, I'll be reacting to it on this channel, so if you enjoyed this video, then you can stick around for that, because I just can't wait for when it actually finally comes out. And if you do enjoy the first season and you are an anime only, I couldn't recommend the manhwa enough. I'm not a manga purist or manhwa purist, I guess, in this case, you know, and it of course is your choice at the end of the day, but the manhwa is amazing. And then from that point on, you got a whole new world of reading ahead of you. My other personal favourite manhwas being Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint, Beginning After the End, The Legend of the Northern Blade, and so on. But regardless, that's it for this video on what I think is the best power fantasy out there, Solo Leveling.